In the dead of an Idaho night, a rusted Range Rover rises from Phantom Lake, hiding a wilted daisy and a silver owl necklace etched with cryptic initials. Sharon Harper's world shatters when she learns it's tied to her daughter Emily, vanished 14 years ago with her husband Scott. A chilling note asks Eleanor about the owl. She knows sets Sharon on a dangerous hunt for truth. As shadows close in, revealing the sinister owl's nest, one question burns: who's still watching, and what secrets will they kill to keep? Stick around, this mystery unravels to a heart-stopping end. The water of Phantom Lake churned like a living thing, spitting foam and secrets as the winch groaned under the weight. It was late summer, 2007, and the dive team from Boise PD had been at it for hours, their faces grim under the heavy Idaho sky. 60 feet down, in the inky depths of a lake so remote it barely had a name, they'd found something that didn't belong. The sonar had pinged erratically, sketching a shape too clean, too man-made, to be a fallen tree or a sunken boat. Now, as the cables tightened and the surface broke, a rusted silver Range Rover emerged, dripping with silt and time. The air turned sour with the stench of wet metal and decay, and the forest around the lakey, a tangle of brittle pines and jagged rocks, seemed to lean in, holding its breath. The lead diver, a wiry guy named Tom, climbed onto the muddy shore, his wetsuit slick with algae. He yanked off his mask and pointed at the vehicle, his voice low but sharp. "That's no accident. Look at the back seat." The other divers crowded closer, their boots sinking into the muck. There, caught in the shredded leather of the rear seat, was a single daisy, its petals gray and wilted but impossibly intact, as if someone had placed it there yesterday. The team fell silent, their eyes darting to the shattered windshield, the caved-in roof, the glove box hanging open like a broken jaw. Tom reached inside, his gloved hand trembling, and pulled out a gold Rolex, its face fogged but still ticking faintly. Engraved on the back were the initials MB. He held it up, and the sunlight caught it, glinting like a warning. Then came the real shock. Tucked in a crevice near the driver's seat, glinting under the weak afternoon light, was a silver necklace. Its pendant was a small owl, no bigger than a quarter, with eyes carved so deep they seemed to stare back. Etched into the clasp were 3 letters. CLS. The divers exchanged looks, their faces pale. "Nobody wears something like that to a car crash," Tom muttered, his voice barely carrying over the wind that howled through the pines. The lake was too deep, too hidden, a place where secrets went to die. Someone had wanted this car gone forever. The mist rolled in thicker now, curling like fingers over the water's edge, and the trees creaked as if whispering to each other. One of the younger divers swore he heard a faint hum, like a voice calling from the lake, but when he turned, there was nothing but ripples. They bagged the necklace, the watch, and the daisy, sealing them in plastic with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The Range Rover sat on the flatbed, dripping and silent, a time capsule from a life that had ended mid-breath. Nobody said it out loud, but they all felt it. This wasn't just a wreck, it was a grave. 400 miles away, in Eugene, Oregon, Sharon Harper stood behind a folding table at the farmer's market, weighing a basket of cherry tomatoes for a regular customer. She was 58, her hair streaked with gray, her hands rough from years of work and worry. The market buzzed around her, kids chasing each other, vendors hawking fresh bread, a guitarist strumming something soft, but Sharon's mind was elsewhere, as it always was. 14 years ago, her daughter Emily had vanished, along with her new husband, Scott Beckett, on the night of their wedding. No calls, no postcards, no trace. Just a hole in Sharon's heart that never closed. Her cell phone buzzed in her apron pocket, and she almost ignored it. Probably another order for her small produce stand. But the number was unfamiliar, an Idaho area code. She answered, her voice cautious. "Hello? Mrs. Harper? This is Detective Ray Duvall, Boise Police Department." The man's tone was calm but heavy, like he was carrying something he didn't want to share. "We've recovered a vehicle in Phantom Lake, Idaho, a silver Range Rover, registered to Malcolm Beckett. We think it's tied to your daughter's case. Can you come to the site? We need you for identification." Sharon's hand froze on the basket, tomatoes spilling onto the table like tiny drops of blood. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. "Phantom Lake?" she whispered, her voice cracking. That's 400 miles from Bozeman." "Why there?" "We don't know yet," Duval said. "But we need you here. Can you make the drive?" She didn't hesitate. Yes. The word came out before she could think, before she could feel the weight of what it meant. She hung up, apologized to the customer, and packed up her stall in a daze. Her pickup truck was parked a block away, a battered Ford she'd driven for 20 years. Before she left, she reached into her glove box and pulled out a small embroidered handkerchief, one Emily had made in high school. It was faded now, the stitching loose, but Sharon clutched it like a lifeline as she hit the highway, the Oregon sun sinking behind her. The drive took 8 hours, the road stretching through endless fields and mountain passes. Sharon didn't stop, didn't eat, didn't let herself think too much. Phantom Lake. She'd never heard of it, but the name alone sent a chill down her spine, like something out of a ghost story. She tried to picture Emily 24, bright-eyed, her laugh like summer rain climbing into that Range Rover after the wedding, waving goodbye. Scott had been beside her, 26, all easy smiles and stubborn love, the kind of man who defied his family's old money to marry a florist's daughter. The Becketts had never approved, especially Malcolm, with his sharp suits and sharper tongue. Sharon could still hear his voice at the rehearsal dinner, low and venomous. "She's not one of us, Scott. You'll regret this." By the time Sharon pulled into the gravel lot near Phantom Lake, it was late afternoon, and the air was thick with mist. The lake was smaller than she'd imagined, maybe a mile across, but it felt wrong, like it was hiding something. The pines loomed like silent watchers, their branches clawing at the sky. The flatbed with the Range Rover was parked near the shore, surrounded by police tape and a handful of officers. Duval met her at the perimeter, a stocky man in his 40s with tired eyes and a clipboard. "Mrs. Harper," he said, shaking her hand. "Thanks for coming. I know it's a long way." "Show me," Sharon said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. She followed him to the flatbed, her boots crunching on the gravel. The Range Rover was a wreck-rusted, crumpled, coated in silt, but there was no mistaking it. She'd seen it parked outside the church that July day, gleaming under the Montana sun, a gift from Malcolm to his son. Emily had laughed about it, saying it was too fancy for her. Now it looked like a corpse, its secret spilling out. Duval held up a plastic evidence bag, with the Rolex inside. This was in the glove box, engraved with M.B., Malcolm Beckett's initials. "Mean anything to you?" Sharon nodded, her throat tight. "Malcolm gave it to Scott when he graduated college, said it was a family heirloom." She paused, her eyes flicking to the car. "What else did you find?" Duval hesitated, then pulled out another bag. The silver necklace glinted inside, the owl pendant staring up at her. This was caught in the driver's seat. Letters CLS on the clasp. Ring any bells? Sharon stared at it, her heart pounding. Number? Emily didn't wear silver. She liked gold, simple stuff. And I don't know any CLS. She reached for the handkerchief in her pocket, her fingers brushing the embroidery. Something about the necklace felt wrong, like it was watching her. "There's one more thing," Duval said, his voice dropping. He showed her a third bag, this one holding the wilted daisy. "Found it on the back seat. Doesn't make sense. A flower like that should have rotted away years ago." Sharon's breath caught. Emily had worked at a flower shop, always tucking daisies into her hair, or leaving them on the kitchen counter. But this one, preserved like a relic, felt like a message. "That's not possible," she whispered, her eyes locked on the flower. Unless someone put it there later," Duval finished, his tone grim. "This lake's deep, Sharon, 60 feet in places, remote as hell. Nobody stumbles into a place like this by accident." Before she could respond, a black SUV pulled up, its tires spitting gravel. Malcolm Beckett stepped out, leaning on a cane, but still commanding, his suit crisp despite the mud. His wife, Eleanor, followed, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, her posture stiff. Jordan, their younger son, hung back, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Malcolm's gaze landed on Sharon, and for a moment, his lips curled, not quite a smile, more like a challenge. "Sharon," he said, his voice smooth as ice. "Didn't expect you to make the trip. Didn't expect your son's car to be at the bottom of a lake," she shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. She felt Duval tense beside her. Malcolm's eyes flicked to the evidence bags in Duval's hand. When he saw the Rolex, he nodded. "That's mine. Gave it to Scott when he graduated. Proof he was here, I suppose." But when Duval held up the necklace, Malcolm's face changed just for a second, a flicker of something like fear. He recovered quickly, turning to Eleanor. "We should get this over with. The media will be crawling all over it soon." Eleanor didn't move, her fingers clutching a silk scarf. Jordan glanced at Sharon, his expression unreadable, then looked away. Sharon's gut twisted. Something was off, something beyond the car and the necklace. She stepped closer to the Range Rover, her eyes scanning the wreckage. That's when she saw it. A faint scratch on the door, barely visible under the rust. It looked like a symbol, a crude owl, etched with a knife. Her mind flashed to a memory, 14 years old, of driving past the Beckett lumber yard in Bozeman. A gate with a small sign, a logo shaped like an owl, and the letters CLS7. "Duval," she said quietly, pointing at the scratch. "You ever see that symbol before?" He squinted, then shook his head. "Number. But we'll check it out. Could be nothing. Or it could be everything," Sharon said, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't trust Malcolm, never had. And now, standing by this haunted lake, with that owl necklace burning a hole in her thoughts, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. The team wrapped up as the sun dipped below the pines, casting long shadows that seemed to crawl toward the water. Sharon drove to a motel in Boise, a cheap place with flickering neon and the smell of stale coffee. Her room was small, the walls thin, the bed sagging. She sat at the desk, the handkerchief in her hands, trying to piece it together. The car, the necklace, the daisy, the owl. None of it added up, but it all pointed to something bigger, something buried deeper than Phantom Lake. She was about to turn off the lamp when she heard a soft scrape at the door. Her heart stopped. She waited, listening, but there was only silence. Then, a faint rustle, like paper sliding across wood. She crept to the door, her pulse hammering, and opened it. The hallway was empty, the motel lot dark except for a single streetlight buzzing like a dying insect. At her feet was an envelope, plain white, no name. She picked it up, her fingers trembling, and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words scrawled in black ink. "Ask Eleanor about the owl. She knows." Sharon's breath caught. She stepped into the hallway, scanning the shadows, but there was nothing, no footsteps, no car, no sign of whoever had been there. The wind carried a faint hum, like the one the diver had heard at the lake, and for a moment, she swore it sounded like Emily's voice, calling her name. She clutched the note, her mind racing. Someone was watching her. Someone wanted her to dig deeper. And someone, or something, was terrified of what she'd find. Sharon Harper sat on the sagging motel bed, the anonymous note trembling in her hands. The words "Ask Eleanor" about the owl. She nose burned into her mind like a brand. The Boise motel room felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the air thick with the stale stink of cigarette smoke and despair. Outside, the neon sign buzzed, casting jagged shadows through the blinds. It was past midnight, and the hum she'd heard at Phantom Lake lingered in her ears, a ghostly echo that sounded too much like Emily's voice. She clutched the embroidered handkerchief, the one her daughter had sewn in high school, its faded threads a tether to a life stolen 14 years ago. Sleep wasn't an option, not with that note, not with the owl necklace and the wilted daisy haunting her thoughts. She stood, pacing the worn carpet, her boots scuffing against the grit. The Range Rover, pulled from 60 feet of black water, was no accident. The daisy, impossibly preserved, was no coincidence. And that necklace, with its carved owl and cryptic initials, CLS, was no random trinket. Sharon's gut screamed that the Beckett's, Malcolm with his cold eyes, Eleanor with her guarded silence, knew more than they let on. But who had slipped that note under her door? Who was watching her, close enough to know she was here, alone, digging into a past everyone else had buried? Her mind drifted to July 1993, to a small church on the edge of Bozeman, Montana. Emily, 24, had stood at the altar in a simple white dress, her dark hair woven with daisies, her smile bright enough to shame the sun. Scott Beckett, 26, had looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered, his tie slightly crooked, his hand steady as he slipped a gold band onto her finger. The Beckett's old money timber wealth that built half of Montana hung over the day like a storm cloud. Malcolm had barely spoken, his jaw tight, his wife Eleanor forcing smiles that never reached her eyes. Sharon remembered Emily's whisper as they hugged goodbye. "Scott's family's complicated, Mom. They've got rules I don't understand." Sharon had brushed it off, chalking it up to rich folks' nonsense. Now, those words felt like a warning she'd ignored. The Newlyweds had driven off in the silver Range Rover, a wedding gift from Malcolm, its chrome gleaming under the summer sky. Emily had laughed, saying it was too fancy for a girl who arranged flowers for a living. Scott had promised they'd be back in a week, maybe after a road trip to Glacier Park or a detour to New Mexico. But they never came back. No calls, no postcards, no credit card charges. Just silence. The police had called it a honeymoon gone wrong, maybe a crash, maybe a runaway romance. Sharon had clung to hope, picturing Emily starting fresh somewhere, free. But deep down, she'd always known. Her daughter was gone, and someone had made sure of it. A car engine rumbled outside, snapping Sharon back to the present. She crept to the window, peeling back the blinds. A black Lexus idled 200 feet away, its headlights off, its shape sleek and menacing in the motel lot. Her heart thudded. She'd seen a car like that before, parked outside the Beckett estate years ago, the kind Malcolm favored. Was it him, or someone else? Someone tied to that note? The car didn't move, but the weight of its presence pressed against her, like eyes boring through the dark. She let the blinds fall, her fingers tightening around the handkerchief. She wasn't safe here. Not anymore. By morning, the Lexus was gone, but Sharon's nerves were frayed. She checked out of the motel, her pickup truck loaded with nothing but a duffel bag and a thermos of diner coffee. Detective Ray Duvall had asked her to meet him at the Boise PD station, but first, she had a stop to make. Jordan Beckett, Scott's younger brother, had called her last night, his voice hesitant. "I found some of Scott's old stuff," he'd said. "Might be something of Emily's in there. Can you come by the house?" Sharon didn't trust the Becketts, not after Malcolm's icy dismissal at the lake, but Jordan was different. He'd been just a kid back then, barely 18, quiet and awkward, never joining in when his father sneered at Emily's low-class roots. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he was the one who'd left the note. The Beckett estate sat 10 miles outside Boise, a sprawling mansion of glass and stone that looked more like a fortress than a home. The driveway was gated, flanked by pines that blocked out the sun. Sharon buzzed the intercom, and the gate swung open without a word. She parked near the garage, her truck dwarfed by the polished SUVs lined up like soldiers. Jordan met her at the door, his flannel shirt rumpled, his eyes red like he hadn't slept. "Sharon," he said, offering a weak nod. "Thanks for coming. It's been a lot." "Tell me about it," she said, her voice dry but not unkind. She followed him inside, the air cool and sterile, the walls lined with framed photos of lumber yards and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. No pictures of Scott or Emily, no trace of the life they'd tried to build. Jordan led her to a study, its shelves packed with leather-bound books nobody read. On a table sat a cardboard box, its edges worn, labeled "Scott's Room" in faded marker. "I was cleaning out some stuff," Jordan said, his hands fidgeting. "Dad wanted it gone, but I thought, maybe you'd want to look. For Emily." Sharon's throat tightened. She nodded, pulling the box closer. Inside were relics of a life cut short, a dog-eared copy of The Catcher in the Rye, a stack of cassette tape Springsteen, Nirvana flannel shirt she remembered Scott wearing. Her fingers brushed something hard at the bottom, a small black velvet box, the kind you'd find at a jeweler's. She opened it, her breath catching. Inside was a folded set of black lace lingerie, tags still attached, and a silver necklace identical to the one from the Range Rover, its owl pendant glinting under the lamplight. Tucked in the lid was a tiny envelope, a card inside with bold masculine handwriting. From CLS, meet me at the cabin, July 10, 1993. Sharon's hands froze. July 10 was a week before the wedding. Emily had never mentioned a cabin, never mentioned anyone named CLS. She looked up at Jordan, her voice sharp. Who's CLS, Jordan? Emily didn't keep secrets from me. She wouldn't have this. Jordan's face paled, his eyes darting to the door like he expected someone to burst in. I don't know, he said, his voice low. Honest, Sharon. Scott. He mentioned something once, a couple months before the wedding. Said someone was following them, watching Emily. I thought he was paranoid, but he trailed off, swallowing hard. Maybe he wasn't. Sharon's mind raced. Following them? The note, the necklace, the daisy, it was all connected, a puzzle with pieces she couldn't yet see. She slipped the card into her pocket, her fingers brushing the handkerchief. Did Scott say who it was? A name? Anything? Jordan shook his head, but his eyes flickered with something fear, maybe, or guilt. He didn't. But he was scared, Sharon. Not for himself. For Emily. He said Dad had plans, big ones, and Emily wasn't part of them. Sharon's blood ran cold. Malcolm. She'd always known he hated Emily, called her a gold digger, a nobody. But plans? That word felt heavier, darker, like a blade waiting to fall. She stood, the velvet box still in her hand. I'm taking this, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument, and I'm going to find out who CLS is. Jordan nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Be careful, Sharon. Dad, he's not the only one who knows things. She left the estate with the box under her arm, her truck rattling as she sped back toward Boise. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air thick with the promise of rain. At a diner off the highway, she slid into a booth, the vinyl seat creaking under her weight. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Bev, poured her coffee without asking. Sharon opened the velvet box again, staring at the necklace, the owl's eyes seeming to follow her. CLS. The initials didn't match anyone she knew, not Emily's friends, not Scott's college buddies, not anyone at the flower shop. But the cabin, the date, the lingerie all pointed to a secret, one Emily had either kept or never known. Her phone buzzed, and she flinched, nearly spilling her coffee. The caller ID showed a Montana number, one she hadn't seen in years. Alma Carter, Emily's best friend from high school, now a freelance journalist in Missoula. Sharon answered, her voice cautious. Alma? It's been a while. Too long, Alma said, her tone warm but edged with urgency. I heard about the Range Rover on the news. Sharon, I've been digging into the Beckett's for a story, and there's stuff you need to know. Can we meet? Sharon's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of stuff? Not over the phone, Alma said. I'm driving to Boise now. There's a bar, the Rusty Nail, off I-90. Meet me there tonight, 8 o'clock. And Sharon, don't tell anyone you're coming. And the call ended, and Sharon sat back, her coffee growing cold. Alma had always been sharp, the kind of kid who asked too many questions. If she was scared to talk on the phone, it meant she'd found something big, something dangerous. Sharon paid her bill, leaving a crumpled $5 on the table, and headed to her truck. The diner's parking lot was nearly empty, but as she climbed in, she caught a glimpse of a black Lexus, parked 300 feet away near a gas station. Its windows were tinted, its engine idling. She froze, her keys dangling in her hand. It was the same car from the motel, she was sure of it. Someone was tailing her, and they weren't being subtle. The Rusty Nail was a dive bar, its sign flickering, its walls stained with decades of smoke and regret. Sharon arrived at 7:45, her truck parked a block away to avoid attention. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of cheap beer and fried onions, the jukebox crooning Johnny Cash. Alma was already there, tucked in a corner booth, her red hair pulled back, a notebook open in front of her. She looked older, sharper, but her smile was the same one Sharon remembered from Emily's graduation party. "Sharon," Alma said, standing to hug her. "God, I'm so sorry. When I heard about Emily's car—" "Don't," Sharon said, her voice soft but firm. "Just tell me what you know." They sat, and Alma leaned in, her voice low. "I've been working on a story about Beckett Lumber. Tax evasion, shady land deals, you name it. But there's more. Back in the 80s, there was a guy, Cole Sawyer, worked for Malcolm. He was trouble arrested for assault, maybe worse, but the charges disappeared. Guess who paid his bail?" "Malcolm," Sharon said, her stomach twisting. Alma nodded. "Exactly. Cole's initials, CLS, I think he's tied to whatever happened to Emily and Scott. The Becketts have people everywhere, cops, judges, you name it. If Cole's involved, he's not working alone." Sharon pulled the velvet box from her bag, opening it to show Alma the necklace and the card. "Found this in Scott's things. CLS again. And this date, July 10, 1993, a week before they disappeared." Alma's eyes widened, her fingers tracing the owl pendant. "This is bad, Sharon. The owlet's a symbol. I've seen it in old company records, tied to a group Malcolm ran. They called it the Owl's Nest, some kind of inner circle. If Emily or Scott crossed them—" She stopped, her face pale. "You need to be careful. These people don't mess around." Sharon's mind spun. The Owl's Nest, Cole Sawyer, the note about Eleanor. It was all connected, a web of secrets with her daughter at the center. She leaned forward, her voice fierce. "I'm not stopping, Alma. Not until I know what happened. Will you help me?" Alma hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, but we do this quiet. No cops yet, not until we have proof. Meet me tomorrow, my place in Missoula. I've got files you need to see." They parted ways, Alma slipping out the back, Sharon heading to her truck. The night was cold, the stars hidden by clouds. She was halfway to her motel when her phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. She answered, her voice wary. "Hello?" For a moment, there was only static. Then a man's voice, low and guttural, cut through the silence. "Stop digging, Mrs. Harper, or you'll end up under that lake like your daughter." The line went dead, and Sharon's hand shook on the wheel. She pulled into the motel lot, her eyes scanning the darkness. The Lexus was there again, parked 50 feet away, its engine silent now. She locked her doors, her heart pounding, and reached for the handkerchief, Emily stitching soft under her fingers. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on her motel door, loud enough to make her jump. She froze, her breath shallow, the note still clutched in her hand. Whoever was out there knew she was alone, knew she was close to the truth, and they weren't here to talk. The knocks on the motel door echoed like gunshots in Sharon Harper's ears, each one sharper, heavier than the last. She stood frozen in the dim Boise motel room. The anonymous note asked Eleanor about the owl. She nose clutched in one hand, Emily's embroidered handkerchief in the other, her heart hammered, a wild thing trapped in her chest. The voice on the phone, low and menacing, still rang in her mind. "Stop digging, Mrs. Harper, or you'll end up under that lake like your daughter." Outside, the black Lexus loomed in the motel lot, 50 feet away, its tinted windows hiding whoever or whatever was watching. The air felt thick, sour with the stench of fear and stale coffee. Sharon's eyes darted to the door, its flimsy lock no match for whoever was out there. She wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Not until she knew what happened to Emily. She crept to the window, her boots silent on the worn carpet, and peered through the blinds. The lot was dark, the neon sign flickering like a dying pulse. No one stood at her door, but the shadows seemed to shift, curling like smoke around the Lexus. Her truck was parked 20 feet away, too far to reach without being seen. Another knock came, slower this time, deliberate, as if the knocker knew she was listening. Sharon's breath caught. She grabbed her keys, stuffed the note and handkerchief into her jacket pocket, and eased toward the bathroom. The window there was small, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, but it faced the back alley. It was her only shot. The window groaned as she forced it open, the rusted frame scraping like a scream. She climbed onto the sink, her 58-year-old joints protesting, and wriggled through, landing hard in the gravel alley. The cold bit at her face, the Idaho night heavy with the threat of rain. She crouched low, her pulse roaring, and scanned the darkness. No Lexus, no footsteps, just the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of pines. She sprinted to her truck, keys shaking in her hand, and slid inside, locking the doors. The engine sputtered to life, and she peeled out of the lot, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The Lexus didn't follow. Not yet. Sharon drove aimlessly for an hour, her mind a tangle of fear and fury. The note, the necklace with its owl pendant, the initials CLS, the daisy and the Range Rover, pulled from Phantom Lake, all of it pointed to a truth buried deeper than she'd ever imagined. Alma Carter, Emily's old friend, had mentioned Cole Sawyer, a name tied to Malcolm Beckett's shady dealings. The Owl's Nest, she'd called it, some secret group within Beckett Lumber. And now someone was trying to scare her off, or worse. Sharon's grip tightened on the wheel. They'd taken her daughter. They wouldn't take her fight. By dawn, she was parked at a gas station 10 miles outside Boise, her coffee cold, her eyes burning. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Alma had promised files, proof of the Beckett's crimes, but Missoula was a 6-hour drive, and Sharon couldn't shake the feeling she was running out of time. Her phone buzzed, and she flinched, expecting another threat. It was Jordan Beckett, Scott's younger brother, his voice shaky. "Sharon, you okay? I heard you left the house yesterday, and Dad's acting weird, angrier than usual." "I'm fine," Sharon lied, her voice rough. "What's Malcolm doing?" "He's been on the phone all night, yelling about loose ends. I don't know what it means, but he mentioned the lumber yard." "Sharon, I think he knows you're digging." Sharon's stomach twisted. "Thanks, Jordan. Keep your head down, okay? And if you hear anything else, call me." She hung up, her mind racing. The lumber yard. Beckett Lumber's main operation was on the edge of Boise, a sprawl of warehouses and sawmills that smelled of pine and secrets. If Malcolm was rattled, he might be careless. She started the truck and headed toward the yard, the sky gray and heavy, the air thick with the promise of a storm. Her plan was half-formed, reckless even, but she couldn't wait for Alma. Not with that Lexus trailing her, not with Emily's ghost whispering in her ear. The lumber yard was a fortress of steel and timber, its gates locked, its perimeter lined with chain link and barbed wire. Sharon parked a quarter-mile away, behind a rusted billboard, and watched. A black Lexus AIM-1, she was sure, pulled into the back entrance, followed by a pickup she recognized from the Beckett estate. 2 men stepped out. Roy, Malcolm's driver, a grizzled guy with a limp and a permanent scowl, and another man, younger, maybe early 30s, with a chain necklace glinting at his throat. Sharon's breath caught. The chain had a pendant, too small to see clearly, but her gut screamed it was an owl, just like the one in the Range Rover, the one in Scott's box. They carried a small metal case, moving fast, glancing over their shoulders. Sharon grabbed a pair of binoculars from her glove box, a cheap pair she used for bird watching, and focused on the younger man. His face was sharp, his eyes darting, his movements tense. Cole Sawyer, she thought, the name Alma had given her. The man tied to Malcolm, to CLS, to whatever had swallowed Emily and Scott whole. She had to get closer. The yard was quiet, the workers gone for the day, the machinery silent. Sharon slipped out of her truck, her boots crunching on gravel, and crept along the fence, keeping low. A gap in the chain link, half hidden by overgrown weeds, gave her an opening. She squeezed through, her jacket snagging on the wire, and ducked behind a stack of pine logs, their sap sticky under her hands. The air was heavy with the smell of sawdust and oil, the warehouses looming like giants in the dusk. Roy and Cole disappeared into a smaller building, its windows boarded, its door marked with a faded sign, CLS 7. Sharon's heart skipped. CLS 7. The same letters as the gate she'd seen 14 years ago, the same as the necklace. She moved closer, her pulse pounding, and pressed herself against the warehouse wall, its metal cold and rusted. Voices drifted through a cracked window, low but sharp, and she strained to listen. "We need to clean this up, Cole," Roy said, his voice gravelly, laced with anger. The Harper woman's sniffing around. "Malcolm wants her gone." "She's just a mom," Cole snapped, his tone edgy, almost desperate. "She doesn't know anything, not about the owl's nest, not about the cabin. We don't need another body." "You think Malcolm cares?" Roy growled. "He said she's a loose end, like Emily was. You want to argue with him? Be my guest, but I'm not going back to that lake." Sharon's blood ran cold. Emily. The cabin. The owl's nest. Her fingers dug into the wall, her nails scraping rust. She wanted to scream, to burst in and demand answers, but she forced herself to stay still, to listen. "Fine," Cole said, his voice quieter now, resigned. "But we do it clean, no traces, like 14 years ago." The words hit Sharon like a fist. 14 years ago. The night Emily and Scott vanished. She edged closer to the window, her breath shallow, and peered inside. The warehouse was cluttered with crates and machinery, but in the center, Roy and Cole stood over a table, the metal case open. Inside were papers, a handgun, and something that glinted, a third owl necklace, identical to the others. Sharon's vision blurred, her mind racing. 3 necklaces. 3 sets of initials. And now, a plan to silence her. She pulled out her phone, her hands trembling, and snapped a photo through the window, the flash off to avoid detection. The image was grainy, but it captured Cole's face, the case, the necklace. Evidence, she thought, her resolve hardening. She needed to get to Alma, to show her this, to blow the whole thing wide open. But as she turned to slip away, her boot caught a loose pipe, sending it clattering against the wall. The sound was deafening in the quiet yard. "Who's there?" Roy barked, his voice cutting through the air. Footsteps pounded inside, and Sharon bolted, her heart in her throat. She ducked behind a stack of lumber, her chest heaving, as the warehouse door flew open. Roy stepped out, a flashlight in one hand, a knife in the other, its blade catching the last of the daylight. Cole followed, his eyes scanning the shadows, his hand hovering near his belt, where Sharon was sure he carried a gun. She crouched lower, the wood splintering against her palms, the smell of sap choking her. Roy's flashlight swept the yard, its beam slicing through the dusk, missing her by inches. "I heard something," he muttered, his voice low. "If it's her, we end this now." "Calm down," Cole hissed, but his tone was tense, his body coiled like a spring. "Could be a raccoon. Let's check the fence." They moved toward the gap she'd used, their boots crunching gravel. Sharon's mind raced. If they found the gap, they'd know someone had been here. She had seconds to move. She crawled along the lumber stack, her knees scraping dirt, and slipped into another warehouse, its door ajar. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the floor littered with broken pallets and rusted tools. She pressed herself against a crate, her breath ragged, and listened as Roy and Cole's voices faded, then grew louder again, circling back. The warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery, its ceiling lost in shadows. Sharon's eyes adjusted to the dark, and she spotted a table in the corner, piled with old files and blueprints. Her heart leapt. If this was CLS-7, there might be answers here, something to tie Cole to Emily, to the owl's nest, to Malcolm. She crept forward, her hands shaking, and flipped through the papers. Most were invoices, shipping logs, nothing unusual. But then she found it, a single page, yellowed with age, listing names under the heading, Owl's Nest, 1993. Cole Sawyer was there, along with Roy Tanner and 3 others she didn't recognize. At the bottom, in Malcolm's sharp handwriting, was a note, EH and SB, terminate if necessary. Sharon's breath stopped. EH, Emily Harper. SB Scott Beckett. Terminate. The word seared her, a blade twisting in her gut. She stuffed the paper into her jacket, her hands trembling, and kept searching. Another file caught her eye, a thin folder marked CLS. Inside was a photo, grainy but clear enough to make her heart skip. It showed Emily, laughing at a bar, her arm around a younger Cole Sawyer, his owl necklace glinting at his throat. The date on the back read June 1993, a month before the wedding. But there was more. A letter, folded tight, in Cole's handwriting. Emily, it began. I never meant to hurt you. Malcolm promised me you'd be free, that we could be together. I didn't know what he'd do. Sharon's world tilted. Cole hadn't just been Malcolm's hired muscle. He'd loved Emily, or thought he did. Malcolm had used him, dangled her like bait to break her and Scott apart. And when that failed, he'd turned to murder. The truth was a jagged thing, cutting deeper with every word. She slipped the letter and photo into her pocket, her resolve burning hotter than her fear. She had proof now, enough to bury Malcolm, enough to make him pay. But then she heard Ida creak, close, too close. She spun, her eyes wide, and saw Cole standing 10 feet away, his silhouette framed by the warehouse door. His face was hard, his eyes glinting with something like regret. You shouldn't be here, Sharon, he said, his voice low, almost sad. You should have stopped digging. She backed up, her hands fumbling for anything to use as a weapon. I know what you did, she said, her voice fierce despite the tremble. You and Malcolm, you killed my daughter. And? Cole's jaw tightened, his hand resting on the gun at his belt. It wasn't supposed to go like that. Emily, she was special. Malcolm said he'd let her go, let us be together, but he lied. He always lies. Then tell the truth, Sharon said, her eyes locked on his. Help me. For Emily. For a moment, he wavered, his hand dropping from the gun. But then Roy's voice cut through the darkness, sharp and cold. Cole, you in there? We got a problem. Cole's face hardened, and he stepped closer, his voice a whisper. Run, Sharon, now. She didn't hesitate. She bolted for the back of the warehouse, her boots pounding the concrete, as Cole shouted something she couldn't hear. She found a side door, rusted, but unlocked, and shoved it open, stumbling into the yard. The storm had broken, rain lashing her face, the ground slick under her feet. She ran for the fence, her lungs burning, the papers and photo heavy in her pocket. Behind her, Roy's flashlight swept the darkness, his voice bellowing her name. She reached the gap in the fence, squeezing through, her jacket tearing on the wire. Her truck was close, its shape a blur through the rain. She fumbled with her keys, her hands slick, and climbed inside, slamming the door. The engine roared to life, and she floored it, the tires spinning on wet gravel. In the rearview mirror, she saw Roy burst through the gate, his knife gleaming, his face twisted with rage. Cole was behind him, shouting, but the rain drowned it out. Sharon's truck skidded onto the highway, her heart pounding, the papers burning a hole in her pocket. She'd escaped, but she'd stirred a hornet's nest. Malcolm knew she was close, and he'd stop at nothing to silence her. As she sped toward Boise, the rain hammering her windshield, a car appeared in her mirror, its headlights blinding. A black Lexus, closing fast, its grille gleaming like a predator's teeth. Roy was behind the wheel, his eyes locked on her, a knife still in his hand. Sharon's breath caught, her hands tightening on the wheel. She was alone, out of options, and the truth she carried was a death sentence. Rain lashed Sharon Harper's pickup truck, the windshield wipers screaming against the downpour as she floored the gas pedal. The black Lexus roared behind her, its headlights slicing through the Boise night like knives, closing the gap on the slick Idaho highway. Roy Tanner, Malcolm Beckett's grizzled driver, was at the wheel, his face a twisted mask of fury, the glint of his knife catching the light. Sharon's hand shook, her knuckles white, the stolen papers proof of the owl's nest, of Cole Sawyer's betrayal, of Malcolm's orders to terminate Emily and Scott burning a hole in her jacket pocket. Her heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat drowning out the storm. She'd escaped the lumber yard, but Roy wasn't letting her go. Not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. The speedometer crept past 70 miles an hour, the truck rattling like it might shake apart. Sharon's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, where the Lexus loomed, barely 50 feet back. She swerved onto a side road, tires screeching, the gravel spitting under her wheels. The papers, the photo of Emily with Cole, the letter confessing his manipulated love, they were her only leverage, her only chance to bury Malcolm. But first, she had to survive. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder, Alma Carter's name flashing on the screen. Sharon fumbled for it, keeping one hand on the wheel, her voice sharp. "Alma, I'm in trouble. Roy's after me. Maybe 10 miles out of Boise. I've got proof papers, a letter. Malcolm's behind it all." "Jesus, Sharon, where are you?" Alma's voice crackled, urgent, laced with fear. "I'm on my way from Missoula, but I'm still 2 hours out. Can you lose him?" "I'm trying," Sharon said, her breath ragged. The road narrowed, flanked by dense pines that clawed at the sky, their branches whipping the truck's sides. "He's too close. I need a plan." "Head for the old quarry off Highway 20, Alma said. "It's a maze of dirt roads, easy to shake a tail. I'll meet you there." "Stay alive, Sharon, you hear me?" The call cut out, static swallowing Alma's voice. Sharon tossed the phone onto the seat, her eyes darting to the mirror. The Lexus was gaining, its engine a low growl, its headlights blinding. She spotted a sign for the quarry, half a mile ahead, and yanked the wheel hard, veering onto a rutted dirt track. The truck lurched, mud splattering the windshield, the stolen papers sliding across the seat. Roy followed, the Lexus fishtailing but relentless, its bumper kissing her tailgate. Sharon's heart leapt into her throat. She floored it, the quarry's jagged cliffs looming in the distance, a labyrinth of shadows and stone. The road twisted, splitting into 3 paths, and Sharon chose the left, praying it led somewhere Roy couldn't follow. The Lexus skidded, falling back, its headlights dimming in the dust. She pushed the truck harder, the engine groaning, until the path dead-ended at a rusted gate, its chain link sagging. She slammed on the brakes, the truck sliding to a stop, her chest heaving. The Lexus was gone, for now, but Roy wouldn't give up. She grabbed the papers, the photo, the letter, and stuffed them into her jacket, zipping it tight. Emily's handkerchief was still there, its stitching a faint comfort against her fear. She climbed out, the rain soaking her to the bone, and slipped through a gap in the gate, her boots sinking into the mud. The quarry was a graveyard of abandoned machinery and crumbling rock, its pits yawning like open wounds. Sharon crouched behind a rusted bulldozer, her breath shallow, listening for Roy. The storm muffled everything, the rain a relentless roar, the wind howling like a ghost. Then she heard a tire's crunching gravel, an engine cutting off. Roy was close, his flashlight beam sweeping the darkness, his voice barking her name. "Harper, you can't run forever." Sharon's mind raced. She needed to get to Alma, to show her the proof, but Roy was too fast, too determined. She crept deeper into the quarry, her hands scraping cold steel as she navigated the maze. A glint caught her eye, a metal box, half buried in the dirt, marked with a faint owl symbol. Her heart skipped. Another piece of the puzzle, hidden here, where no one would look. She pried it open, her fingers numb, and found a single key, its tag engraved with CLS7. The same code as the lumberyard warehouse, the same as the gate she'd seen 14 years ago. She pocketed it, her resolve hardening. Whatever CLS7 was, it was the key to Malcolm's empire and Emily's death. Footsteps crunched behind her, and Sharon dove behind a pile of gravel, her breath hitching. Roy's flashlight swept past, missing her by inches. She waited, her body pressed to the ground, until his steps faded. Then she ran, her boots slipping, her lungs burning, toward the quarry's edge, where a dirt road looped back to the highway. Headlights flashed ahead, not Roy's Lexus but a beat-up Jeep, its engine idling. Alma's voice called out, low and urgent. "Sharon, get in." Sharon sprinted, diving into the passenger seat as Alma gunned the engine. The Jeep roared off, mud flying, the quarry shrinking in the rearview mirror. Sharon's chest heaved, her hands clutching the papers, the key, the handkerchief. "Roy's still out there," she gasped. "He's not stopping." "I know," Alma said, her eyes locked on the road, her red hair plastered to her face. But you've got something, don't you? Show me. 1. Sharon pulled out the papers, the photo, the letter, spreading them on her lap. This is it, Alma. Malcolm's orders to kill Emily and Scott. Cole Sawyer he loved her, or thought he did. Malcolm used him to break them up, then he had them killed. And this key it's for CLS-7, some kind of secret in the lumber yard. Alma's jaw tightened, her hands gripping the wheel. The Owl's Nest, she said, her voice low. It's not just a club, Sharon. It's a network, cops, lawyers, politicians, all tied to Malcolm's money. Emily and Scott must have stumbled onto it, maybe at that cabin Cole mentioned. We need to get to my place, scan these, send them to every news outlet I know. They drove in silence, the storm raging outside, the Jeep's headlights barely cutting through the rain. Sharon's mind churned. The Owl's Nest, CLS-7, Cole's letter, confessing a love twisted by Malcolm's lies. It was all coming together, but the danger was closer than ever. She glanced at Alma, her friend's face set, determined. Why are you doing this? Sharon asked, her voice soft. You could walk away, stay safe. Alma's eyes flicked to her, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Emily was my best friend. She deserved better. And you're not giving up, so neither am I. They reached Boise by midnight, pulling into a cheap motel on the city's edge, its neon sign buzzing like a trapped insect. Alma had a room booked under a fake name, a precaution she'd learned from years of digging into dangerous stories. Inside, the air was stale, the walls thin, but it felt safer than Sharon's last motel. They spread the papers on the bed, Alma snapping photos with her phone, uploading them to a secure cloud. Sharon held the CLS-7 key, its weight heavy in her hand. We need to know what this opens, she said. It's in that warehouse, I'm sure of it. Tomorrow, Alma said, her voice firm. We're both dead on our feet, but first, we need to talk to someone who knows more than she's letting on. Eleanor, Sharon said, the name bitter on her tongue. Malcolm's wife had been at Phantom Lake, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, her silence louder than words. The note asked Eleanor about the owl had come from someone who knew she held secrets. Sharon's gut said Eleanor wasn't just a bystander, she was part of this, or at least close enough to see the cracks. Alma nodded, pulling a laptop from her bag. I've got an address for the Beckett estate. We go first thing, catch her off guard. But Sharon, if she's involved, she won't talk easy. We need leverage. They worked late, piecing together what they had, the photo of Emily and Cole, the Owl's Nest list, Malcolm's orders, Cole's letter. Alma found an old article, buried in a 1993 archive, about a cabin fire near McCall, Idaho, the same area Scott had rented for the honeymoon. No bodies, no suspects, just ashes. Sharon's heart sank. The cabin, the date on Cole's note July 10, 1993. It wasn't the honeymoon. Something had happened before, something that set the stage for murder. By 6 in the morning, they were back in the Jeep, the storm gone, the sky a bruised gray. The Beckett estate loomed 10 miles outside Boise, its glass and stone walls cold and unyielding. Sharon's hand shook as they approached the gate, but she buzzed the intercom, her voice steady. Sharon Harper, I need to see Eleanor, now. The gate opened, no questions asked, and Sharon's gut twisted. Too easy. They parked near the garage, the same spot where Sharon had met Jordan 2 days ago. Eleanor was waiting at the door, her silk scarf fluttering in the wind, her face pale but composed. Sharon, she said, her voice tight, I wasn't expecting you, or your friend. Sam. This is Alma Carter, Sharon said, stepping forward. We're not here to chat, Eleanor. We're here about the Owl's Nest, about Emily, about what you know. Eleanor's eyes flickered, a crack in her armor, but she gestured them inside. The study was the same books nobody read, photos of lumber yards, no trace of Scott or Emily. Eleanor sat, her hands folded, her posture rigid. I don't know what you think you found, she said, her voice icy. But you're mistaken. Malcolm's a businessman, nothing more. Sharon pulled the papers from her jacket, slamming them on the table. Businessman. He ordered my daughter's death, Eleanor. Scott's too. Here's the proof: his handwriting, his orders. And Cole Sawyer. He was in love with Emily, manipulated by your husband. You knew, didn't you? About the owl's nest, about the cabin, about everything. Eleanor's face didn't move, but her hands trembled, betraying her. Alma leaned in, her voice low, cutting. We've got a letter, Eleanor, from 1993. You sent it to Sharon, warning her about Malcolm. But it never arrived. Why? Did he stop you? Or did you change your mind? Sharon's breath caught. The twist hit like a punch. Eleanor, the note's author, the one who tried to warn her all those years ago? She stared at Eleanor, her voice shaking. Is it true? Did you try to save Emily? Eleanor's composure cracked, her eyes glistening. I couldn't stop him, she whispered, her voice breaking. Malcolm wanted Emily gone. She wasn't suitable, he said. I wrote the letter, slipped it to a maid to mail, but he found out. He burned it, said if I ever spoke, he'd ruin me. I didn't know he'd kill them, Sharon. I swear, I didn't know about Scott. Sharon's fists clenched, her voice raw. You let my daughter die. You let your son die. And you did nothing. Eleanor's head bowed, tears falling, but Sharon felt no pity, only rage. Alma touched her arm, her voice calm. We need more, Eleanor. The owl's nest, what is it? And what's CLS-7? Eleanor hesitated, then spoke, her voice barely audible. It's a vault, in the CLS-7 warehouse. Malcolm keeps his real books, their deals, payoffs, names. If Emily and Scott found it, that's why they died, but you'll never get in. He's got men everywhere. Sharon held up the CLS-7 key, her eyes blazing. We'll see about that. If... They left Eleanor crumpled in her chair, the mansion's silence suffocating. Back in the Jeep, Sharon's mind spun. Eleanor's confession, the vault, the key, it was all falling into place. But the danger was closer than ever. They drove to the lumber yard, the morning sun weak, the air heavy with the smell of wet pine. The CLS-7 warehouse was locked, its door reinforced, but the key fit, turning with a soft click. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the crates marked with owl symbols, their contents hidden. In the center was a steel vault, its lock gleaming, the CLS-7 key a perfect match. Sharon opened it, her hands trembling, and found a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Scott's handwriting. March 1993, he wrote. Emily's scared. Someone's following her. Someone Malcolm knows. I found papers in Dad's office, details, names. Something called the Owl's Nest. If they know we know, we're dead. Sharon's heart broke, the words a knife. Scott had known, and he died for it. Alma snapped photos, her face grim. This is it, Sharon. Enough to take Malcolm down. We need to. A deafening roar cut her off, the warehouse shaking as an explosion tore through the back wall. Flames licked the crates, smoke choking the air. Sharon grabbed the journal, shoving it into her jacket, and pulled Alma toward the door. They stumbled outside, coughing, the yard a chaos of fire and debris. And there, in the flickering shadows, stood Cole Sawyer, a gun in his hand, his face hard but broken. You should have listened, Sharon, he said, his voice heavy with regret. Now it's too late. Flames roared behind Sharon Harper, the CLS-7 warehouse collapsing into a inferno of splintered wood and molten steel. Smoke choked the Boise night, stinging her eyes as she stumbled through the lumber yard, Alma Carter at her side. Scott Beckett's journal, its pages scrawled with warnings about the owl's nest, was clutched tight against her chest, a fragile lifeline to the truth about her daughter Emily's murder. The explosion had been no accident. Someone wanted the evidence gone, and Cole Sawyer stood 20 feet away, his gun gleaming in the firelight, his face a mask of regret and resolve. You should have listened, Sharon, he said, his voice heavy, almost broken. Now it's too late. Sharon's heart pounded, a frantic rhythm drowning out the crackle of flames. Alma grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a stack of pine logs, their sap sticky underfoot. The air was thick, acrid, the heat searing their skin. Sharon's eyes locked on Cole, his his owl necklace glinting at his throat, the same symbol etched into her nightmares. He'd loved Emily, his letter had said, but Malcolm Beckett had twisted that love into a weapon, turning Cole into a pawn in a game that ended with 2 graves. Now, he was here to finish what Malcolm started. Sharon's voice was raw, defiant. "You don't have to do this, Cole. Tell the truth, for Emily." "Vort." Cole's hand trembled on the gun, his eyes flickering with something like pain. "You don't get it," he said, his voice low, strained. "Malcolm owns me. Always has. If I let you walk, I'm dead." "Then we're all dead," Alma snapped, her red hair plastered with sweat, her eyes fierce. "You think Malcolm's gonna save you? He threw you to the wolves 14 years ago." Cole's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a shout cut through the chaos. "Cole, move it." Roy Tanner's voice, sharp and guttural, echoed from the shadows. Headlights flared, a black Lexus skidding into the yard, its tires spitting gravel. Roy leaned out the window, a shotgun in his hands, his face twisted with rage. Sharon's stomach dropped. They were trapped, the flames behind them, Roy and Cole in front, the journal her only weapon. "Run," Alma hissed, shoving Sharon toward a narrow gap between the logs. They sprinted, their boots slipping on wet ground, the fire's heat licking their backs. A gunshot cracked, splintering wood inches from Sharon's head. She ducked, her breath ragged, and dove behind a rusted forklift, Alma collapsing beside her. The journal slipped from her jacket, landing in the mud, its pages fluttering like a wounded bird. Sharon grabbed it, her hand shaking, and stuffed it back inside, zipping her jacket tight. Emily's handkerchief was still there, it stitching a faint anchor in the chaos. "We need to get to my Jeep," Alma whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's parked 100 yards out, past the fence. If we can make it." Another gunshot rang out, closer this time, and Roy's voice bellowed, "Harper, you're only making this harder." His flashlight swept the yard, its beams slicing through the smoke. Cole was moving too, his steps quieter, more deliberate, like a predator stalking prey. Sharon's mind raced. The Jeep was their only shot, but the yard was a maze of logs and machinery, and Roy's shotgun could cut them down in seconds. She needed a distraction. She spotted a stack of fuel cans near the burning warehouse, their metal glinting in the firelight. "Alma," she whispered, pointing. "Can you get to those? Tip one over, make a mess. I'll draw them off." Alma's eyes widened, but she nodded, her face set. "Be careful, Sharon. Don't play hero." Sharon forced a grim smile. Too late for that. She waited until Alma crept toward the cans, then stood, waving her arms. "Roy, over here." Her voice echoed, raw and defiant, pulling Roy's flashlight toward her. She bolted, dodging between crates, her boots pounding gravel. A shotgun blast roared, shredding a pallet behind her, wood shards flying like shrapnel. She dove behind a steel drum, her chest heaving, as Roy's curses filled the air. A crash echoed from the fuel cans, followed by a whoosh of flame as Alma kicked one over, the gasoline igniting in a blazing arc. Cole shouted, his voice lost in the roar, and Sharon seized the moment, sprinting for the fence. Alma was already there, her hands clawing at the chain link, pulling it wide. They squeezed through, the metal tearing Sharon's sleeve, and ran for the Jeep, its shape a blur in the rain-soaked night. Roy's flashlight swept behind them, his footsteps pounding, but the fire had slowed him, the smoke a choking veil. They reached the Jeep, Alma diving into the driver's seat, Sharon scrambling in beside her. The engine roared, and Alma floored it, the tires spinning on mud before catching traction. The lumberyard shrank in the rearview mirror, the flames a distant glow, but Sharon's heart didn't slow. Roy and Cole were still out there, and Malcolm was pulling the strings. She clutched the journal, its pages heavy with Scott's warnings, and the CLS-7 key, its weight a promise of answers. "Where to?" she gasped, her voice rough. "Out of Boise," Alma said, her eyes locked on the road. "We need to hide, scan this journal, get it to the press. Malcolm's got too many eyes here." They drove for an hour, the rain easing, the sky a bruised purple. Alma pulled into a rest stop 30 miles outside town, its lot empty except for a lone semi-truck. They sat in silence, the Jeep's engine ticking as it cooled. Sharon opened the journal, her hands trembling, and read aloud. July 8, 1993. Emily saw someone outside the flower shop last night. A guy with a necklace, an owl. She thinks it's one of Dad's men. I checked his office, found papers about the owl's nest deals with names I don't recognize, millions in cash. If they know we're onto them, we're done. Sharon's voice broke, tears burning her eyes. Scott had known, and he died for it. Emily too. Alma's face was grim. That's enough to nail Malcolm. But we need more, that key CLS-7. It's got to open something bigger, something they're still hiding. Sharon nodded, her resolve stealing. Eleanor said it's a vault, in the warehouse. But we can't go back now. Not after that explosion. Then we go to the source, Alma said. The cabin in McCall. Scott mentioned it, Cole too. If that's where it happened, there might be something left evidence, anything. The drive to McCall was 100 miles, the road winding through mountains and forests, the air cold and sharp. Sharon's mind churned, replaying Cole's words, Eleanor's confession, the owl symbol that haunted every step. By noon, they reached the site, a burned-out cabin near a lake, its skeleton blackened, its roof gone. The air smelled of ash and pine, the ground littered with debris. Sharon stepped out, her boots crunching on charred wood, Emily's handkerchief in her pocket like a talisman. They searched the ruins, their hands sifting through ash and broken glass. Alma found a rusted lockbox, its lid warped but intact. The CLS-7 key fit, turning with a gritty click. Inside was a single item, a folded map, its edges frayed, marked with a red X 20 miles outside Boise, in a field off a county road. Sharon's heart skipped. This is it, she said, her voice trembling. Where they buried her. Alma's eyes darkened. Or both of them. We need to check it out, but we're not cops, Sharon. We need Duval. Sharon hesitated. Detective Ray Duval had been straight with her, but the owl's nest had tendrils everywhere. Cops, judges, who knew how far it reached? Still, she had no choice. She called him, her voice steady despite the fear. Ray, it's Sharon. I've got proof. Scott's journal, a map. I think Emily's buried in a field off County Road 12. Can you meet us? Duval's voice was cautious but firm. Send me the coordinates. I'm bringing a team. Stay put, Sharon. Don't do anything stupid. They waited, the lake lapping softly, the ruins whispering ghosts. By dusk, Duval arrived with a forensic team, their vans kicking up dust. Ground-penetrating radar hummed, scanning the field marked on the map. Within an hour, they found Ida's shallow grave, 3 feet deep, the soil disturbed, uneven. Sharon stood back, her breath shallow, as the team dug. The first glimpse of Fabrica blue dress, faded but unmistakable, the one Emily wore on her wedding night, tore a sob from Sharon's throat. Dental records would confirm it, but she knew. Her daughter, her light, was here, hidden for 14 years. Duval approached, his face heavy. We found something else, he said, holding up a sealed urn, its label reading, C.L. Sawyer. Sharon's heart stopped. Scott. Malcolm had cremated his own son, hidden him under a false name. She clutched Emily's handkerchief, tears falling, as Duval's team bagged the evidence, their movements precise, somber. We've got Cole in custody, Duval said, his voice low. Picked him up an hour ago, near the lumber yard. He's talking, Sharon. Says Malcolm hired him to scare Emily, break her and Scott up. Roy was there too, at the cabin in McCall. Things went wrong. Roy snapped, killed them both. Malcolm cleaned it up, buried Emily here, burned Scott's body. Cole swears he didn't pull the trigger, but he's guilty as hell. Sharon's knees buckled, but Alma caught her, her grip firm. What about Malcolm? Sharon asked, her voice raw. He planned this. He's the one. We're building a case, Duval said. The journal, the map, Cole's testimony, it's enough for a warrant. But Malcolm's slippery. We need more. Sharon's eyes burned, her resolve unbreakable. Then we get it, tonight. No. They drove back to Boise, the field fading in the dusk. Sharon's mind was a storm of grief and rage, but a new piece clicked into place. Jordan Beckett, Scott's younger brother, had been too quiet, too helpful. He'd given her Scott's box, warned her about Malcolm's anger. Was he part of the owl's nest, or something else? She remembered the note asked Eleanor about the owl. She knows, and Eleanor's confession, her failed warning. Someone else was pulling strings, someone who wanted the truth out but couldn't show their face. At the motel, Alma scanned the journal, sending copies to her contacts at the Idaho Statesman and a national outlet. "This goes live tomorrow," she said, her voice fierce. "Malcolm can't hide now." Sharon nodded, but her eyes were on the CLS-7 key, still in her pocket. "We need to end this," she said. "Malcolm's at the estate. Let's confront him, get him to talk." Alma hesitated, her face pale. "Sharon, he's dangerous. If he knows we've got this." "Then we move fast," Sharon said, her voice steel. They drove to the Beckett estate, the mansion looming under a starless sky. The gate was open, unguarded, a trap waiting to spring. Sharon clutched the journal, the key, the handkerchief, her heart pounding as they approached the door. Jordan answered, his face pale, his eyes wide. "Sharon, what the hell are you doing here?" "We're here for Malcolm," Sharon said, stepping inside. "He's done, Jordan. We've got proof. Scott's journal, Cole's confession. Where is he?" Jordan's hand shook, but he pointed to the study. "He's in there." "But Sharon, I need to tell you something. Before he could finish, Malcolm's voice cut through, cold and sharp. "Sharon Harper, you're persistent. I'll give you that." He stood in the doorway, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes glinting like a snake's. Roy was behind him, his shotgun lowered but ready, his face a mask of loyalty and menace. Sharon held up the journal, her voice fierce. "You killed my daughter, Malcolm. Your own son. This proves that your orders, your owl's nest, your lies. It's over." Malcolm's smile was thin, venomous. "You think a few papers will stop me? This family is bigger than you, bigger than Emily, bigger than Scott. They were a mistake, and I fixed it." Sharon's blood boiled, her hand tightening on the journal. "You fixed nothing, you murdered them, and I'll make sure the world knows." Malcolm stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. "You're out of your depth, Sharon. Roy, take care of her." Roy raised the shotgun, but Jordan moved faster, pulling a handgun from his jacket, his voice shaking but firm. "No, Dad, it's done. I've been sending Sharon the notes, the clues. I knew what you did, and I couldn't live with it anymore." Sharon's breath caught, the twist hitting like a thunderbolt. Jordanthi, quiet brother, the one she'd trusted, was the one who'd slipped the note under her door, who'd pointed her to Eleanor, to the owl. Malcolm's face twisted, a snarl of betrayal. "You? My own son? You killed Scott," Jordan said, tears in his eyes. "You killed Emily. I won't let you kill her too." Roy lunged, the shotgun swinging toward Jordan, but Sharon dove forward, tackling Malcolm, the journal flying from her hands. The room erupted, gunshots, shouts, glass shattering. Alma screamed, pulling Sharon back as Jordan fired, Roy's body crumpling, blood pooling on the hardwood. Malcolm scrambled for the shotgun, but Duvall's voice boomed from the doorway. "Freeze. Boys at PD. Drop it, Malcolm." Cops swarmed the room, their guns drawn, Malcolm's hands raised, his face a mask of defeat. Jordan lowered his weapon, his body shaking, his eyes locked on Sharon. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have told you years ago." Sharon's chest heaved, her mind reeling. Jordan was the one, the shadow helping her, risking everything to expose his father. But as the cops cuffed Malcolm, her eyes caught something in the chaos, a figure outside the window, barely visible in the dark, an owl necklace glinting at their throat. She froze, her heart stopping. The owl's nest wasn't just Malcolm. Someone else was out there, watching, waiting. Sharon Harper stood frozen in the Beckett mansion study, her heart pounding as Boise police officers swarmed the room, their boots thudding on the hardwood. Malcolm Beckett, his face a mask of cold defiance, was cuffed, his whiskey glass shattered on the floor, its amber liquid pooling like blood. Roy Tanner's body lay crumpled, a dark stain spreading beneath him, his shotgun useless at his side. Jordan Beckett, Scott's younger brother, stood trembling, his handgun lowered, his eyes wide with the weight of what he'd done, betrayed his father to save Sharon. Alma Carter gripped Sharon's arm, her breath ragged, her face pale but fierce. Scott's journal, its pages damning Malcolm with orders to terminate Emily and Scott, lay scattered across the floor, a testament to 14 years of buried truth. But Sharon's gaze was locked on the window, where a shadowy figure had vanished, an owl necklace glinting at their throat. The owl's nest wasn't dead. Someone was still out there, watching. Detective Ray Duval stepped forward, his voice steady but heavy. "Sharon, you okay?" He glanced at the journal, then at Malcolm, his eyes narrowing. "We've got enough here to lock him up for good. Cole's talking, the journal's solid, and Jordan's testimony seals it. But we need you to stay safe. This isn't over." Sharon nodded, her throat tight, Emily's embroidered handkerchief clutched in her pocket. "I know," she said, her voice raw. "That figure outside, whoever they are, they're part of this. The owl's nest. It's bigger than Malcolm." Duval's yaw tightened. "We'll look into it, but for now, let's get you out of here." He gestured to an officer, who escorted Malcolm out, his cane tapping the floor, his silence louder than any confession. Jordan followed, his head bowed, his hand shaking. Alma stayed close to Sharon, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk, her journalist instincts still sharp despite the chaos. They drove back to the motel, the night heavy with the smell of rain and ash. Sharon sat on the sagging bed, Scott's journal open in her lap, its words a knife in her heart. Emily's grave, found in that desolate field 20 miles outside Boise, had confirmed her worst fears: her daughter, buried in her wedding dress, hidden for 14 years. Scott's ashes, labeled C.L. Sawyer in a Beckett vault, were the final blow. Malcolm had killed his own son, burned him to erase the evidence, and used his empire to bury the truth. But Jordan's betrayal as secret notes, his quiet rebellion had cracked the facade, giving Sharon the chance to fight. Alma sat across from her, uploading the journal's scans to her contacts at the Idaho Statesman and a national outlet. "This hits the news tomorrow," she said, her voice fierce. "Malcolm's done. The owl's nest, whatever's left of it, can't hide now." Sharon nodded, but her eyes were distant, fixed on the memory of that shadowy figure. "There's someone else out there, Alma. That necklace, I've seen it too many times. The car, the warehouse, now here. They're not done with me." Alma's face softened, her hand resting on Sharon's. "We'll find them, but tonight, you need to rest. You've done what Emily would have wanted. You found her." Sharon's eyes burned, tears spilling over. "I found her body," she said, her voice breaking. "But not her justice, not yet." The next morning, the story broke. Headlines screamed across Boise, then the nation: timber tycoon arrested in double murder cover-up. Reporters swarmed the police station, their cameras flashing, their voices buzzing about the Harper Beckett case, a 14-year-old mystery ripped open. Malcolm refused to speak, his lawyers circling like vultures, but Cole Sawyer's confession was damning. He'd been hired to seduce Emily, to drive a wedge between her and Scott, but when that failed, Malcolm's orders turned deadly. Roy, unhinged and loyal, had killed them at the McCall cabin, and Malcolm had orchestrated the cover-up. Emily buried in a shallow grave, Scott burned and hidden. Cole took a plea deal, trading a reduced sentence for every detail. Roy's death closed his chapter, but Malcolm faced 2 life sentences without parole. Sharon didn't watch the news. She didn't need to see Malcolm's face, his cold eyes staring through the cameras. Instead, she drove to Bozeman, Montana, where the air was crisp, the mountains a quiet sentinel. She'd chosen a plot near the foothills, a place where the wind sang through the pines, where the trees didn't feel like watchers. 2 gravestones, side by side, marked Emily and Scott's final rest. The inscription was simple, carved in stone. They chose love. He tried to erase it. He failed. Sharon had paid for it herself, selling her old pickup to cover the cost. It was worth it. The funeral was small. Just a few dozen people gathered under a gray October sky. Old friends from Bozeman, neighbors who'd known Emily as a kid, co-workers from the flower shop, their faces lined with grief and time. A few of Scott's college buddies stood at the back, their heads bowed, their words few. No cameras, no speeches, just a quiet goodbye. Jordan was there, his flannel rumpled, his eyes red. He approached Sharon, a folded letter in his hand, his voice soft. "I found this in Scott's things. He wrote it a week before the wedding. I thought you should have it." Sharon took it, her fingers trembling. The paper was worn, the ink faded, but Scott's handwriting was clear. "Emily taught me love isn't loud," he wrote. "It's quiet defiance, a choice you make every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I'll choose her forever." Sharon's tears fell, blurring the words, but she read on, her heart breaking and healing at once. Jordan stood beside her, silent, his hands in his pockets. "Thank you," Sharon said, her voice barely above a whisper, "for the notes, for helping me." "You didn't have to." Jordan's eyes glistened. "I did. Scott was my brother. Emily. She was good to me. I should have spoken up years ago. I'm so sorry, Sharon." "It's not your fault," she said, her hand resting on his arm. "Nobody saw it because nobody wanted to." The crowd drifted away, leaving hugs and quiet words. She deserved better. He was a good man. Sharon stayed, the wind tugging at her coat, the gravestones solid under her touch. Jordan lingered too, his gaze on the ground, like he was carrying the weight of his family's sins. They didn't speak, but the silence was enough, a shared grief that needed no words. Weeks passed, and the headlines faded. Beckett Lumber's board stripped Malcolm's name from every building, every contract. Eleanor vanished from Boise's social scene, her charity boards abandoned, her jewelry sold off. Sharon heard she'd moved to a small town in Oregon, living alone, a ghost of the woman she'd been. Sharon didn't care. Eleanor's tears at the mansion hadn't erased her silence, her complicity. Forgiveness wasn't on the table. Sharon returned to Bozeman, her life no longer a holding pattern. The flower shop where Emily had worked, shuttered for years, was up for lease. The landlord, an old friend, offered her a deal, and Sharon took it, pouring her savings into reopening it. She named it Emily's Grace, keeping the shelves simple, the inventory small. Daisies filled the front window, their petals bright against the glass. Locals came, some out of loyalty, some out of curiosity, but they stayed because the place felt alive, honest. Jordan stopped by every week, helping with deliveries, his quiet presence a bridge to the past. They'd sit on the back steps, eating sandwiches, talking about Emily, her laugh, her love of old rock songs, her hatred of mushrooms. Each memory was a prayer, a way to keep her close. One afternoon, a teenage girl walked in, her Bozeman High sweatshirt faded, her hands clutching a crumpled $10 bill. She picked out a small bouquet of daisies, her movements shy. As Sharon wrapped the flowers in brown paper, the girl hesitated, her voice soft. "You're Emily Harper's mom, right?" Sharon nodded, her heart catching. "Yeah, that's me. My mom knew her," the girl said, her eyes bright. "Said Emily was kind, never acted like she was better than anyone, even when people were mean, said she was special." Sharon smiled, her throat tight. "Your mom's right. Kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. Emily had that in spades." The girl left, the bell above the door jingling, and Sharon stood there, staring out the window at the Montana sun. For the first time in 14 years, she felt a flicker of peace, like Emily was there, her laugh echoing in the rustle of the flowers. That night, she pulled out a journal she'd kept since Emily vanished, its pages mostly blank except for one note, stuck to the first page, written in Emily's teenage scrawl. "You don't have to be loud to matter." Sharon read it, her fingers tracing the words, then closed the book, turning off the shop's lights. Some stories didn't get happy endings, but they got truth. For now, that was enough. But the truth wasn't done with her. A week later, as Sharon locked up Emily's Grace, she found a small package on the doorstep, no name, no address. Her heart skipped, the memory of that anonymous note, "Ask Eleanor," about the owl still sharp. She opened it, her hands trembling, and found a silver owl necklace, identical to the ones from the Range Rover, from Scott's box, from Cole's neck. Tucked inside was a folded note, the handwriting unfamiliar, precise. Emily saw too much. So will you, if you keep looking. Sharon's breath caught, her eyes scanning the street, but it was empty, the dusk heavy with shadows. She called Duval, her voice steady despite the fear. Ray, it's Sharon. I got another note, another necklace. The owl's nest, they're still out there. Duval's sigh was heavy, tired. We're looking, Sharon. Malcolm's locked up, Cole's in protective custody, Roy's dead. But that network, it's deep. We found names in the journal, people we're tracking. Stay sharp, okay? Don't take chances. Sharon hung up, the necklace heavy in her hand, its owl eyes staring like a warning. She didn't take it to the police, not yet. Instead, she tucked it into her journal, next to Emily's note, and locked the shop. The wind outside was cold, carrying a faint hum, like the one she'd heard at Phantom Lake, like Emily's voice calling her name. She stepped into the street, her eyes scanning the shadows, and saw a figure, 50 feet away, standing under a streetlight, an owl necklace glinting at their throat. They didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Sharon's heart pounded, but she didn't run. She stared back, her hand on the handkerchief, her resolve unbroken. Whoever they were, whatever the owl's nest still hid, she'd find them. For Emily, for Scott, for the truth that refused to stay buried.